For our viewers across Africa and the rest of the world, this is NC Continental Prime. I'm Kofi Bartels, being in the news at this hour in West Africa, where the Nigerian government has described a judgment over the $11 billion arbitration case by the Process and Industrial Developments Limited, also known as P&ID, against the federal government of Nigeria as a victory over corruption. Both Nigeria's Attorney General of the Federation and the Minister of Finance spoke after the weekly Federal Executive Council meeting, saying the case heard by Justice Robin Knowles of the Commercial Court of England and Wales prioritized the merits of the case above other considerations.
This successful result is a decisive victory for the people of Nigeria, who stood to lose over 11 billion United States dollars for the Nigerian administration, and for the Nigerian administration, which has now reached a milestone in its mission to challenge the scourge of corruption. The judgment also serves as a damning indictment of predatory international investors, who should now rightfully be deterred by preying upon Nigeria and other developing nations to satisfy their greed.
A very delightful moment during the Federal Executive Council meeting when the news filtered in that Nigeria had indeed won this case, and of course, as expected, the President was very elated, so also members of the Federal Executive Council were all very happy that that news filtered in, and this is one direction that Mr. President is going, ensuring that things are dealt with expeditiously, responsibly, and with utmost.
Well, that's an interesting development for Nigeria. We're joined tonight to discuss this further by a lawyer and public affairs analyst, Liborous Oshoma. Liborous, thank you very much for joining us tonight on the news. The judge ruled that the award was obtained by fraud, and it was contrary to public policy. How, in your opinion, can international arbitration cases like this impact, the perception of a country's legal and business environment among the foreign investors in the world, around the world?
Yeah, first and foremost, the aspects I would want to look at is the way the judge handled the matter, looking at the foundation of the award itself, unlike, the award, the contract itself, what led to the contract, where procedures actually followed in awarding the contract before looking at the terms and conditions of the contract. If this were handled in the Nigerian court, we'll probably be looking at, the contract stricto sensu, without actually looking at what gave rise to it. I'll quickly give you an analogy. Remember last week we talked about the EFCC chairman and the foundation for the appointment. That is what the court basically had looked at now to say, you know what? The foundation for this contract is faulty. It's contrary to public policy. So you can't, and like we say in law, you can't put anything on, or you can't put something on nothing and expect it to stand. The foundation for the award, that the contract itself was fraudulent. It was obtained through bribery and corruption. And so, if you now want to talk, it's tainted with fraud. And so you cannot be talking about breach of a contract that has been tainted ab initio with fraud. And for me, that's a way that I think our legal system, our judicial interpretations should also look at to enhance confidence in commercial transactions in Nigeria, to also boost the confidence of the contracts that firms enter into with Nigerian government. Because oftentimes than not, you hear that contracts that are signed in Nigeria, there is one allegation of compromise here and there, that somebody had to bribe to be awarded a contract. And the Liborous scandal comes to mind, the Dan Etete's, OPL 246 now comes to mind, and we're still struggling with repatriating about $1.6 billion of that money back to Nigeria, that was paid into private accounts. So all of this, the way we can build confidence in private investors is to ensure that not just our arbitration, rise above board, our judicial interpretation of commercial transaction also looks at not just the nature of the transaction, but the foundation of it altogether.
All right. Little word popped in my head, technicality versus merit or justice based on a last rendezvous. But let's not go there. This court is yet to decide what will happen to the fraudulent $11.5 billion award. A future hearing will decide that. But what do you think, in your learned opinion, the outcome will be?
Yeah, but like I told you, first and foremost, the last time, let me quickly, even though you don't want to go there, but I will still go there. Technicality in civil matter is different from technicality in the electoral matter. So, and that's why you're seeing this matter now, and the court says, look, we can't close our eyes to the fact that what actually originated the transaction was fraud. So that's said. But another area I want to look at, I really didn't get your last question, is the fact that, why offenders, contract of this nature, why allegations of fraud and compromise, are raised, but back home here, nobody's punished actually, because the allegations about $250,000 was moved from, I think, Ireland to Nigeria to compromise certain officials before the contract was eventually awarded. But what happens to those officials? Will they be prosecuted here? That's another ball game altogether. Then let me get your last question.
Like I was saying, the court is yet to decide what will happen to the award of $11.5 billion US. But a future hearing, from what we hear, will decide what will happen to that award. But what do you think that outcome will be as far as the award of that $11.5 billion is concerned?
When we already see the direction the court is going. The court has said, well, because what led to the award in the first place is the party had alleged breach of contract, that the contract for the construction of the gas plant, Nigeria was supposed to supply gas, and that Nigeria had refused to supply gas. And so that had affected their proposed earnings from that transaction. And so the contract has been breached. And so they immediately activated the arbitration clause to collect the damages of $6.3 billion, and which interest eventually grew to 11 billion here now. So what the court has basically said is that, look, this contract, is contrary to public policy, and there were compromises, and that there were allegations of fraud and corruption. So that said, even though this money had been deposited, the court saying that, look, Nigeria, you're not liable to pay this. You have not breached a contract because the contract in itself is fraught with fraud. So what that means is that Nigeria certainly, that will go in the way of Nigeria also. And that will also, to a very large extent, help Nigeria heave a sigh of relief, considering the fact that we are going through, a serious economic crisis and having to pay $11 billion away. That's what that will do to the Nigerian economy. And so I know that with what the pronouncement that the court had made, that award certainly will go in favor of Nigeria.
All right. Liborous, the Nigerian government lawyer Mark Howard had fingered claimed some Nigerian officials were accessories to this scam, or this fraudulent deal. You've talked about it in a bit, but now, with the benefit of hindsight, can our legal system, set in motion a process to go after those who were complicit in Nigeria, on the Nigerian side?
Yes, we can if we want to. The fact remains that it is not that we do not have the laws to deal with all of these compromises. The EFCC Act clearly, the Nigerian Police Act also, the Criminal Code, the Penal Code, this, specifically with all of these, allegations and all of this crime. But what we lack here is the willpower to do justice to such matters. And the fact that at the end of the day, we say the windmill of justice grinds slowly here, but surely, but we forget that justice delayed is justice denied. You remember I cited the case of the Liborous scandal. All of the, officials abroad that were in Europe and America that were fingered in that scandal were all jailed in their country, apart from those people who received the bribe in Nigeria. You remember the Jefferson scandal also in America. Also, a sitting congressman had to lose his seat over bribery scandal in Nigeria. But here, people who were allegedly, fingered in that transaction today are running for various public offices. And same thing with the OPL 246 scandal that had consistently, gone to various courts. The issue here is that while other countries make laws to punish, offenders, but here although we have the laws in abundance, but they are observing breach, and so we hardly do. I also remember not too long ago, a company was fined $20 million in Switzerland for bribing MPA officials in Nigeria. But unfortunately, the same company that was bribed just changed directors in Nigeria and still went ahead and issued contract by MPA here in Nigeria. Nobody was punished, no consequences for action. So these are the challenges. And I think that we need to do things, we need to begin to do things differently. It is when we now begin to take those steps that serious-minded business people internationally will take us seriously, knowing fully well that once there is a compromise, there will be consequences. Look at all the Abacha loot. Despite all the recovery that had been made, how many people have been punished for those loot? Some of them are holding political offices today. So these are the challenges.
All right. Liborous will watch that space to see what happens in the coming weeks and months. But thank you very much for your sterling analysis as always.
Always my pleasure.